Good evening, everyone. I probably don't need the mic tonight. I want to thank you all for coming and braving the elements. It is Wisconsin, and this was very unexpected, even as of last night. We weren't expecting this kind of weather. So I want to welcome you all to our Fireside Chat with Meg Medina. If you are interested or you are in need of either language translation services or closed captioning, if you open your phone and you scan the QR code on either one of these two screens, it will open up a web browser and it will allow you to select the language you would like closed captioning in and language translation as well. And it will do, there are 6 languages available for translation, English, Spanish, we have Hebrew, Vietnamese on there, and German as well. So if you want to test your German out, this is your chance to do that. We are so grateful for the community grants that we received to be able to bring Miss Medina here. We received a grant through the Chilton Area Community Foundation within the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region. And the Manitowoc-Calumet Library System also provided us with some funds to be able to bring the author in. And then in addition to that, we received funds so that we could provide a copy of Meg Medina's book to every school-aged child who lived in the school district. So from public school, private school, to homeschoolers, we had books in both Spanish and English. And then we had some picture books for the younger kids as well. And we received grants through the Community Ideas Fund, through the Community Foundation for the Fox Valley region. We received a grant with our partnership with the United Church of Christ in Malone, and that was through the United Church of Christ Catalyst Fund campaign. So we are so grateful to be able to provide both books to all the students and to bring in Miss Medina. If you don't know, she is a New York Times best-selling author. She is currently the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature through the Library of Congress. And many of you already know, Glennie Whitcomb is going to be the person who will be interviewing her. So if you'd like, let us welcome Miss Glennie Whitcomb and Miss Meg Medina.
That you say you came to writing fairly late.
I did.
You had other careers.
I did. I was a teacher for 10 years. I wrote grants for schools and raised money. I was a freelance journalist. I did lots of different things that I liked. I especially loved teaching. That was my favorite, I think. But I always just wanted to be a writer. I couldn't get it out of my system, even when I was good at doing other things. And that was especially true as a teacher, because I was an English teacher and a creative writing teacher. And so I spent my days immersed in language and kids and creativity, and all of that was really fun and wonderful. And there was a lot of guilt that I felt that wasn't enough somehow, still. And then, I had moved to Virginia. I was working in development, and I was telling you guys at
oldest daughter was a student there. And my office was the custodial closet, the former custodial closet. So it smelled like that piney smell, that cleaner, you know, it never goes away. And I had no windows, and I was just typing all day, asking for money. And I got up one day, I don't know, I turned 40. I think something happened, right? And I just went to the principal, her name was Candace, and I said, Candace, I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice. I'm gonna go home and write a novel. And she looked at me like, oh, you know, like one of those things. And I did. I went home and I told Javier, my husband, that I had quit my job. And we had 3 little kids at the time, so Javier turned pale, really, really pale. But to his eternal credit, Javier said to me, well, you jumped out of the plane, so now I really think you need to pull the cord so your chute opens, and the cord is that you have to write this novel. He said, I think you can do it. You know, and that meant a huge deal to me because Javier and I've known Javier since I'm 5. His mother and my mother worked in the same factory in New York. So there's not a time in my life that I really don't remember Javier being a part of. So when he said, I think you could do it, it felt good. So for a year, you know, we lived on his salary, which was not easy, and I wrote. And I finished that novel and I sold it to Henry Holt.
And what was the name?
Yeah, it was called Milagros, Girl from Away. So Milagros is of course a girl's name in Spanish, but it also means literally miracles. And it's a novel about a little girl who is displaced. She is set out on the sea by her mom after her island is taken, and she has to make her way to this new place. It's a lot of magical realism. It has this sort of feeling of like being in another time. And when it came out, I thought, I have arrived. My life is set. Great. I'll be famous. And nobody bought this book. It was a super quiet book. And it went out of print pretty quickly, after a couple of years. And my heart was broken. Your editor calls you and she says, the book's going to be remaindered. And I said, well, what does that mean? And that means, you know those bins at Barnes & Noble and bookstores where the book is 50 cents or something? Those are the remaindered books. And then what isn't sold in remainder is torched, right, or disposed of. So I scraped up as much money as I could, and I bought as many copies of Milagros as I could. They were everywhere in my house. But, you know, today I really only have 1 or 2 left.
And were you already working on your next one when that happened, or were you in between projects? Or?
You're always working on another book, I think. You finish one, and then it takes so long for a book to get produced, right? It takes a couple of years. So in that time, you're doing something else. So yeah, I was struggling with my next novel, which was originally called Ibera, which is Crab Woman. I was writing a novel, I thought, about crab workers in Maryland. The crab industry in Maryland is heavily held up by women from a certain town in Mexico, and they come and they pick crab. It's dangerous work, it's cold, there's a lot of things to it. And they're often really young, and they're supporting their families back home. They come seasonally to work. And it's not really like a Latino center place, right? And so they're completely displaced in this thing. And I was so intrigued by that actual story in the Washington Post, and I said, I'm going to write a novel, and so I wrote it, and I kept failing at this novel, and today the novel exists as The Girl Who Could Silence the Wind. There's not a crab worker in it, completely different trajectory, but it's also the story of displacement. But I was working on that novel and failing, and do something easier. I'm gonna write a picture book. Anybody who writes picture books knows they're the hardest to write because they're really short, and you have to write this big story that has layers for the parent and for the child, and it has to be evocative, all these things.
Like 16 pages.
Oh my gosh, and 32. And so I said, I'm gonna do this picture book. And I sat down, I had no business doing that, and I started to write a picture book from one line that came to me, which was, Tiaisa wants a car.
Yes.
And I have an aunt named Tiaisa who bought the first family car. She was a dreadful driver, and there was something about her buying that car that just was this moment that our family sort of acknowledged that we were not returning to Cuba. Cubans in that first wave assumed that they were coming to the country temporarily until the mess blew over. And the mess never blew over, right? And so suddenly this temporary thing became this permanent thing. So when Isa bought that car in New York, it was like, we're here. We have to be here, and we have to find a way forward here. And also because Isa was so nervous, and nobody thought she could drive or get a license or drive around, as my grandmother would say, "Esta loca, a woman driving by herself in this country." Like, I would have had all kinds of ideas. So, you know, it was a good lesson for a young girl, you know.
One of the students today asked you how many books you'd written, and 14. So along that road, Merci Suárez Changes Gears is number 1.
Oh gosh,
Like halfway through? Or?
it's probably, all right, so Yaki, it's probably like five or
Okay.
6 in there.
And you came to her, and it's cold outside.
Yeah.
And I'm really thinking that for anybody who hasn't read Merci Suárez, if you could read us
A little bit.
from the book to give us a sense of her voice, a sense of
Yeah.
how it feels in there, because I love the book. It's a really, if you haven't read it, I really recommend
So,
you all read it. It's
yeah,
really-
Mercy's, Merci is in the 6th grade. She goes to Seaward Pines Academy. She's a scholarship student there. And so is her brother, who's a genius, math and science student, Rolly. She lives in the way that many Latino families live traditionally, which is in extended families. Grandmother, abuela, and her very favorite, her grandfather Lolo, in one little house. She with her brother Rolly and her parents in the middle, and on the side, Tia Inez and these psycho 5-year-old twin cousins who she always gets stuck babysitting. And it's a story of her 6th grade year, and I'm going to just read you the parts of a chapter 6. If you have the book, you can follow along. It starts on 74. And this is the moment where she and Lolo are going to the bakery on Sunday to buy the breads and sweets that they always have for their Sunday family dinner. And I think it's the one that gives the closest peek to Merci. So, I don't know how it happens. 1 minute, Lolo and I are pedaling home from El Caribe on the shady side of the street, and the next minute, he's gone. At first, I don't even notice that he's disappeared because I'm caught up in my latest story. And then she said, "Okay, Merci can bring her dumb buttons like she was the queen, doing me a favor, Lolo. Can you believe it? She said I was a pain." As usual, we've taken the long way home, so we can catch up without anybody listening to our conversation or telling us what chore we have on our list today. But when he doesn't say anything, I look over my shoulder, and that's when I see him sprawled out on the street. "Lolo!" I toss down my bike and race back to him. "What happened? Are you all right?" He looks just as stunned as I am as he tries to untangle himself from his bike. In all the years that riding together, he's never fallen. In fact, Lolo's the one who taught all of us to ride, including Papi and Tia Inés when they were little. He showed me how to balance with no hands, fix a slipped chain, and lube the gears to keep things smooth. A trickle of blood drips from his eyebrow where his new glasses have dug in. They're crooked now, and the lenses are all scraped. Pebbles are stuck against his bloody palm, too. It's nothing, nothing, he says. He winces, though, as he gets to his knees. I hit a sandy patch, that's all. The tires are getting old on this thing. I look around for the skid, but there's none. There's no sand anywhere, either. In fact, there's just the same little buckles in the sidewalk that we've been riding over every Sunday for as long as I can remember. I help him get to his feet, remembering sheepishly that he did look a little wobbly this morning as we pushed out of the driveway. I should have paid more attention, but Lolo never has so much as a cold. Plus, he's always been a sports nut like me. Baseball, swimming, biking, he does it all. All the pastries that we bought at El Caribe are strewn on the ground. Oh, let's pick these up before the ants start feasting, he says. We might be able to salvage some if we hurry. Lolo and I always go to El Caribe on Sunday mornings to get bread and desserts for later. It's the one chore I don't mind because it's our private time together. We leave the house when the sky is still pink, and we get there at 7 a.m. when Tia Inés is pulling out the first loads from the oven. We buy them for Sunday dinner, which is our one time every week when we all eat together. It's not technically dinner, though. It's almuerzo cena, which I think should be called lunner or dinch, because we eat around 3 o'clock and just have a snack before bed. It's not Sunday dinner without the bread and desserts, though. There's no way we can show up empty-handed without Abuela yelling at us. So I dust the end of one of the loaves. Luckily, the second loaf stayed in the paper and is just fine. Lolo picks up the box of cookies and peeks inside. A few are broken, but it's not a total catastrophe. We'll stick the bad ones in the bottom before Abuela can see. We should clean that cut up, though, I tell him. Blood has made a long drip along his cheek. I unhook the water bottle from my bike's frame, and I aim the nozzle at him. Ready? He pockets his mangled glasses and scrunches his face. Fire! He says. I squirt him until we're both laughing, and then we walk back down the street to get my bike. Lolo's shirt is soaked, so I point to the corner bus stop. Why don't we rest on the bench while you dry off? I'll check your tires. Lolo sits down while I get to work, and I go over absolutely everything on the bike, and it looks perfect, like for a relic. The tires look okay to me, I tell him. You've got plenty of tread. He says, ignoring me. He rummages inside the box of cookies and takes out a broken one. I bet a little sugar will give me a lift. You want one? I join him on the bench, and together we watch the early traffic go by for a little while as we eat. Hardly anybody is out at this hour, so it feels quiet with just the sound of our munching on broken treats. Do you think Edna is right about me? Am I a pain? You can tell me the truth. I hate the way the words sound loud. All I can think of are the times when the twins are being impossible. You are such pains, I tell them. But then something about how Edna talks to me always makes me feel like I'm not as good as she is, like there's something wrong with me. Lolo wipes the crumbs from his lips. A pain. Ridiculous, he says. more than we like others. That's not bad. It's just, and I'm gonna stop there, so you guys can, Edna is her nemesis at school. Yeah. There's always, did you have a nemesis at school?
I went to 5 different schools.
Oh, you moved a lot. So you were always
So,
some kids.
so yes, so I never, everyone sort of seemed like the nemesis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My editor was the same way. When I wrote Evelyn Del Rey's Moving Away, that was the one thing she said to me. That's a picture book about 2 little kids playing together, the last play date before Evelyn moves. And she said to me, oh, I want to buy this book. She said, because I moved so often. And it was so hard to say goodbye to my friends and start again.
It is.
Did you find it hard too?
Yeah, it definitely did. And I don't have the continuity of, it's always fun for me to see, like here in town, that people will, I guess teachers who maybe taught the parent of the, you know, there's such a sense of continuity in community and people know each other and yeah, I don't have that. But now I do because I've been here long enough to have that, which is a really wonderful thing.
How long have you been in Chilton? You didn't know I was interviewing you, but there you go.
Since 1980, gotcha. Since 1980, yeah. So yes, it's, I love how, so you're still a teacher. You're in your writing and you're sharing and in your creating of stories and you're dealing with all kinds of topics that are difficult and often difficult topics that others might not want to handle. And you do it really beautifully and naturally and sort of like truth line, lots of truthfully and sort of how difficult it is and yet how we cope and how we find our way through it. Your windshield analogy, again, of looking through into the distance and we don't often know where we're going, but
Yeah. I found growing up really hard. I liked being in elementary school, and then from middle school on through high school, it was just excruciating. And I just remember all of it so clearly. I remember like really selected events really clearly. But I remember mostly like the feeling of it.
yeah,
And that's what I tap into when I'm writing for
which
kids.
is great. Because a lot of people might have those feelings and like run the other way.
Yeah, right.
And you
Well,
do a
that's
really nice job.
That's the secret.
Yeah.
That's the secret. You run to the, you know, like firefighters. They run into the fire, right? While other people are running away. Writers kind of do the same thing emotionally. They, you know, obviously I'm not 11, right? But I run back to 11 and 12 and 13. I remember Charlene Volpe in the 6th grade saying terrible things to me and making me feel terrible. You know, just all those moments of feeling cut away from people. And the outrage kids feel. Like for Merci, right? Lolo, of course, is ill. And the family's not shared that with Merci yet. She will find this out over the course of the novel. And that outrage she feels that her family has kept something from her. When she's 11 and 12 and I can handle things and that rage coupled with how frightened she is by what's happening to Lola. And then school and Edna, like all the things. You know, it happens all at once, that's the thing. And the other thing is that you have to be funny when you're writing for children because their lives are like this, right? Like there are really hilarious, funny moments that sit right next to bitterly painful things that happen, and it goes like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could spend a day with one of your characters, who would it be and what would you do together?
Oh. Well, Merci really is kind of fun. I go biking with Merci, I think. but I might, I love to dance. Do you like to dance?
Privately.
Okay. I love to dance. I love Latin dance. I love salsa,
I've learned
merengue, and all those things. My husband's the worst dancer there is. There is no rhythm inside that man. So it is so painful.
So he could be the maypole and you can dance around him.
Oh my goodness. It is, so I end up dancing by myself. But anyway, Nora in Burn Baby Burn, she really loves disco dancing. So it might be fun to hang out with Nora and go disco dancing for an evening, if I'm being honest. But yeah, they're fun. All the characters, like, they become real for you. So there are parts of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd like to, meet Robbie from this book.
And
Messi's brother.
Yeah. And do you feel like your trilogy, because Merci Suárez Changes Gears is a trilogy, there's 3 books,
Yeah.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Yes.
Any chance she might come back later, or who knows?
No.
Or is she complete?
Nope, she's complete. So she wasn't complete at the end of the 6th grade. Like, I finished the novel, it won the Newbery, beautiful things happened for it, and I kept thinking about her. Like, what happened, like, from 6th to 8th grade, you remember, right? It's just a metamorphosis. It's just shocking what happens. And so I wanted to know what was going to happen with Global. I wanted to know, she can't get rid of Edna. Edna goes to her school. Edna is a fact of life. There is an Edna in everybody's life. So how is she going to figure out how to deal with this difficult person, right? And how is she going to come to terms with the moments when she's kind of difficult and awful? Because she has plenty of moments that are not a nice shake-up. You know what I mean? And that's the other conversation that I really like to have with kids. Because I feel, especially in middle school, they're trying on personality after personality. They're stretching and figuring out where their own boundaries are, who their friends are, who their friends might be, like all these things. And there are moments when certainly they feel like the victim. But for sure, there are plenty of times when they do something that is unkind or very uncharacteristic or just not the right thing. And being able to talk with them about that without heavy judgment. What do you do when you make a mistake? How do you walk back from that? How do you fix it? What are having just that conversation about being human and offering each other grace, I think.
You weren't a writer. What career do you think you'd have chosen and why? And you've already had some.
Oh, I've had so many. I would have stayed a teacher, I think.
Okay.
I really liked teaching. Now, I taught years ago. I think the profession has changed, so I don't know. How would it be now with like all the testing that goes on and things like that? And I ran my classroom in a really rangy kind of way, so I don't know if I could still be the kind of teacher that I was. But I would do that. Maybe I'd be a dancer. Like a backup dancer for, I don't know. Who should I be? J-Lo or somebody, how about Eris? I'll join the Eris.
Well, would you tell us a little bit about the Library of Congress and what it's like having an office at the Library of Congress and what you do in your position capacity as the ambassador for youth?
Yes. I get to do it for another week. Next week is the big goodbye party. And then February 5th, I think they'll announce the new top secret ambassador. So what happens is that there are 100 people in the country who are nominators. And they nominate authors who they think should be the nation's book friend. And then that list goes to a small committee, and they talk about each person. In this top secret, you're not allowed to say anything else about this outside of this group. And make recommendations. The sitting ambassador is one of the people on that committee. We make recommendations, and then the librarian of Congress takes your recommendations, reads them, and either goes with the choices that you suggested, because you have to give a rationale for why you think each person gets would make a good person. And it's not about their writing only, interestingly. It's about their ability to connect, their ability and willingness to travel for 2 years. It's a lot of travel, a lot of disruption of your personal life. A person who's able to see it in a service model as opposed to an aggrandizing model, right? And just what's in the air in the country at the time. So when I took the helm, we were just coming out of COVID, and everybody was just coming back to school. And teachers were saying things like, the kids are behind, like something's wrong here. We don't know really, you know, there are kids coming into 3rd grade who haven't been into school at all, right? So all the little things you learn in school haven't been put in place. What do we do? And this gigantic fall away from reading. So that's the country I came into. So how do we engage children again around reading? So my platform is Cuéntame, let's talk books. It's Cuéntame, which in Spanish is like, so tell me. We say that to our friends. Cuéntame, how's your family? Cuéntame, how did it go at soccer? It's a friendly phrase. And so Cuéntame, let's talk books is the fact that I was the first Latina in the role. And that was important for Latino children to see that we have a literary life, that we have a reading life, that they can have a reading trajectory, a literary trajectory. And it was also important for me to be the ambassador of all the children in the nation from every background. So, bilingual. And I designed, it was based on book talking, which I think Chilton Public Library does all the time. Working with kids on how we talk to each other about books in a way that has nothing to do with how we do it at school. A 1-minute book commercial. Tell me why you love this book. And here's what happens, always. I give the 1-minute conversation about this book, a commercial, dynamic sort of talk. And then we start talking, and within like 2 or 3 minutes, you know something about me, like the things I find interesting. You're gonna ask me a question, I'm suddenly gonna find out about you, and it's like that. So it creates not only enthusiasm for the book, but relationship. And any good teacher knows that almost no learning will happen in your classroom unless you establish a relationship with your students and that they can establish a relationship with each other. Like it's key. It's what makes a really good classroom relationship. So I book talked all over the country. They sent me on tour. I'm in Seattle, Louisiana, New Hampshire, Texas, Kansas, Missouri, where else? Florida, Massachusetts, you name it. I was on the road. I also did office hours at the library. If you ever are in Washington, D.C., I really do want you to go to the Library of Congress. It's spectacularly beautiful. And free, there's lots of tours, and my office is in the attic. The mad woman in the attic. With a little dome at the top of the library. It's underneath, you'll see a window. That's my office. It's beautiful. And it looks out over the Capitol. So, you know, I'm looking out over Congress. To the right of us is the Supreme Court building, and you see all of D.C. It's a very fancy, schmancy place. Marble, and all these works of art, and this beautiful, grand reading room. And so sometimes people feel like they don't belong here, especially if your family doesn't have a background that's high in literacy comes to us. It's part of our nation's DNA. This notion that we have the right to learn what we want to learn, have access to read what we want to read, that we should be able to be as informed as possible to be able to govern ourselves. That's at the basis of it. So when kids come to see me, they would come and they would book talk. I tour them around the library, and then I tell them the important things that kids want to know, like the fact that the windows in the Library of Congress, when the wind blows hard, sounds like the building is passing gas. It makes a sound like that. All over the place, so we call it the gassy windows of the Library of Congress. We went to see, all of the little nooks and crannies that they would find fun. And then, I did a video series that I hope you guys will get cards for. It's called Let's Talk. 18 children's authors journeying to the Library of Congress to sit with me and do 6-minute interviews. So the result is a Russell Stover box of chocolates of ours. So you can sample, what does Jared Krasaska have to say? And Saba Tahir, and Cece Bell, and it's a cross-section of writers. And they were all just marvelously big-hearted and loving and smart. And they had, some of them were loud readers as kids. Some of them were told they were not good students. And here they are, writing beautiful work. And I feel like I wanted to leave that in the archives of the library.
Remind me the name of that series?
It's just like Cuéntame, Let's Talk Books, but it's the video series. And you'd go on the
YouTube.
Library of Congress's YouTube page and just type Cuéntame, Let's Talk Books. But if you can't there's a QR code on a card outside. And check it out and share it. They're wonderful. They're wonderful, wonderful interviews on everything from graphic novels to horror to contemporary. Some of the talks are really serious. Some are funny. All the things.
Yes, I'm going to be looking those up.
Yes, they're
Yes.
good.
I'm wondering if anybody in the audience might have any questions for Meg. And if you'd like to ask any writerly kinds of questions, like what's your process, or how do you think of characters, or do they knock on your head at night when you're sleeping? Those kinds of things, or if anybody wants to ask a question. Awesome.
It sounds like you have a pretty good memory of your middle school years, but I'm wondering what other ways or tools you use to get into the headspace of a kid to be able to write through that lens.
Yeah, it truly is almost always through memory. So if I'm writing a teen novel, and I know it's going to be a YA novel, before I even start designing the character and so on, I usually have some idea, for example, one YA novel that I might still someday write will feature a family where one of the people in the family has intellectual disabilities, like my daughter. But my daughter is one of 3 children. They have entire relationships, they have all of that. And so, how would I shape that in a way that's respectful to a person with intellectual disabilities and doesn't use that character as some sort of difficulty for other characters, that kind of thing. So I usually just pick an age, and I think of myself as that age. I'll set a timer for 6 minutes. 6 minutes. I'll write 12. And I'll say to myself, okay, someone I remember when I was 12. I write the person's name down. And then I write for 6 minutes. Every last thing I can think of that person. How their hair looked, what they said to me, on and on and on and on and on. And the memory just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And then 6 minutes ends, and I set the timer again for 2 minutes. And I ask myself, why do I remember this? So memory is really funny, that file cabinet we walk around with. Why do we remember what our grandmother's hands look like? Or the smell of your grandmother's sweat? Or what the flowers look like in a particular garden? Or that kid who ate glue and sat next to you in the 3rd grade? That's why do we remember it? It's never for the reason you first think. So I take 2 minutes and I think, why do I remember Charlene Volpe? And I write down a deeper thing. And that deeper thing, the why, is usually one of the things that I say, okay, this is one of the underpinnings of the novel. That's, a novel for kids is plot. It's the stuff that happens. But the bigger thing is the why. Why people act the way they do. So I think that's how I do it. The other thing is that I Frankenstein people all the time. I take my grandmother, unite her with my sister, throw in a neighbor, boom, I have this character that I need. So I do that also. What else can I do? Yes.
Did you have Edna in your life?
Say that again?
Did you have Edna in your life?
Do I have
An Edna in your life.
Did I? Charlene Volpe. Yes. Charlene Volpe. And here are the unflattering things. I remember that Charlene Volpe had blackheads on her nose. I remember that Charlene Volpe had very oily hair. I remember that Charlene Volpe was the tallest girl in class. I remember that Charlene Volpe really disliked me. And all the things that she would say. So I just, and here I am in my 60s, and I still remember this girl from when I was in the 5th grade, 5th and 6th grade. So I think sometimes we have those conflicts with kids, and we never forget them. But in the novel, we never cure Edna of her Edna-ness, right? But by the 7th grade and the 8th grade, both these girls have to figure out how to tangle, how to figure out what it is that makes them fight all the time. And they're stuck together. Like in the 7th grade, Merci is stuck doing the photography for the dance. And who is in charge of the dance? Edna. So, she can't escape her. And in the 8th grade, we continue. So, relationships evolve. And just like people evolve. And there are friends that you're going to hold really tight, and friends sort of like colleagues. Kids that you're going to go to school with and figure out how to be with. And that's the best that you're going to be able to do.
Yeah, the power of stories.
Yeah, I think so. Any other questions?
The process of getting a book published.
Oh, so it's a painful process is the first thing I'm going to say. So typically you need what's called an agent, and that's like your business person. So when I finished Milagros, the manuscript, I got it into the best shape that I knew how to get it myself, and then I needed representation. A literary agent is the person who's going to negotiate the contract, take your work to the different editors and say, here, we have this new author that we think you should look at. So there was a book called The Writer's Digest Guide to Literary Agents or something like that. And I made a spreadsheet, and I'm not good at spreadsheets like you. I'm terrible, right? Excel is not my friend. But I did know how to make columns and rows, right? So name of the literary agent, their address, and the date I sent it. And if they wrote back to me, if they gave me any comment, I wrote that comment. So sometimes you just got a form letter back. No, this is not right for our list, right? I didn't write those down. But every once in a while, I got someone who would say, like this, but, or this is wrong for us right now, but please come back to us with your next book, like things like that. And I kept track. And then I would wait till I got 5 rejections, and then I'd send it out to 5 more people. And then eventually, this young agent named Jen Lofay in California, who was just starting to acquire books, found Milagros in her mail. And it turns out she's Cuban also. And so she read this book and she said, oh my goodness, this sounds so familiar, right, to her story. And she called me. It was so funny because she was nervous. Now I know this. We've been together now all these years. She called me and she said, I'd like to offer an exclusive. May I offer an exclusive on this? And I said, yes, of course. And I thought to myself, and so she had no idea. Like in her mind, like lots of people were after me. In my mind, we were total newbies together. And my editor also at Candlewick ended up, eventually, I was her first acquisition too. So the agent is the one who sells your book. You work with an editor will decide that they're going to give you the book, you get an advance, which is basically just a loan. They front you money. And then your book has to earn out, right? Pay back that loan, so to speak. It takes a few years. A picture book can take 5 years or so, because the illustrator, they have to then find an illustrator who's really busy. So a picture book could take a long time. A novel could take 2 or 3 years. And then, along the way, they're designing the cover, they're doing all of that. And then it's out there. Today, as authors, they ask us to have social media presence, to engage with book talk, to have a Facebook page, to go to TikTok, all of these things. And that is really stressful, especially for the writers who are introverts. They just can't stand it, but that's what it takes now. There's the artistic part, the sacred part where you're quietly writing your book, and then there's this whole business part that is that just takes it's a business that you're running on a daily. So not quite as romantic as it sounds. It's not like Virginia Woolf.
You really took a chance by just
Quitting.
writing this book and not knowing.
Yes, my husband was really, really pale. Yeah, he was really, really worried. And in the beginning, you don't make a lot of money. Your advance is small, and if a book takes 3 years, right, you're not going to get another advance for another 3 years. So it's pretty grim in the beginning. Later, when you have many books, some burned out, and so you're getting royalties and you're getting advances on new ones, and then the money starts to make sense. But in the beginning, you have to be prepared for the fact that it's not necessarily a really lucrative thing. Now I say that, and then there are people whose first book becomes a New York Times bestseller. They're explosively successful, but that was not the way I came in. I was, yeah.
And you share, and we only have a couple more minutes, but I think it's really helpful to how many times do you revise a book?
Oh.
The whole editing process is painful.
It is. It is. And
Because you think
I want to give up on every book I've ever written. It's always in the middle. I can write the first 50 pages like this. I'm so happy. And then somewhere around page 56, 57, I'm like, I hate this book. This book is terrible. This book will end my career. I'm stopping this book. I'm giving up on this book. Kate, I'm sorry, I can't do this book. And my editor, Kate, says, oh, okay. And then she calls me the next week and she said, how's it going on the book? And she pretends that I did not have the total, collapse. So that happens all the time. I call my friends and I'll say, can you just read this one chapter and tell me what you think? Or I'll say, one of my dearest friends is Lamar Giles. He wrote The Last Day of Summer. Do you know that book? 2 cousins who accidentally freeze the last day of summer. figure out how to unfreeze it. He also writes a lot of YA. But anyway, he lives in Virginia, and I'll call him, and I'll say, I'm stuck here. What do you think? Like, I have a novel coming out in the summer. It's for kids who are 10 to 14 or 15. It takes place in the abyss, in the deep ocean. Everyone is dead. They're all ghosts. Cheery for children. And so there's a scene where these two spirit Portuguese explorers, right, come to the bad guy, right? And something bad's going to happen. And so, but I love these Portuguese explorers. They're always arguing, these two brothers. I kind of love them. I said, okay, Lamar, so here it is. And I lay out the scene, and I tell him the whole thing. And he said, well, I said, so I don't know, like, how much to hurt them, you know, like, just a little stab, what do you do? And he goes, oh, no, one of them has to be completely off, and it has to be the ones the kids like the most. And I was like, are you sure? So, it's interesting, this advice. Yes, I'm sure. And just, kids like to be scared. They like to get on a roller coaster at that top of the roller coaster and go, I'm dying! Like that. And it's the same sort of experience with a spooky book, right? They want to be scared knowing that there is a safe landing. I'm there at the end. It's not a terrible landing. But that thrill ride for them of being, in this dark sea, that kind of thing. But friends help me all the time. And then just learning to not be precious about my words. Like when I was working all those jobs,
That's a big one.
it is, because you write it and you've worked hours on something, and then your editor says, I didn't like that chapter. We could do without it. What? It's beautiful. Did you read this sentence? And you keep trying to save it. And again,
Your file.
yes, I have a graveyard. So Kate, the brute, right? She's always telling me, let's move this. I don't like this. So I keep a file on my computer called the graveyard. And that's where I keep ideas that went nowhere, stories that I started that didn't come to anything, and all the things, the great writing that Kate has asked me, like lift out of my books and put there. And they live in the graveyard. And then I visit the graveyard periodically, and I dig up the bones. And I look around my previous things. I find a name for a character, or I find a setting, or I find an idea. So this book that comes out in July, In the Graveyard, the first version of it was in 2010. That's when I started writing that book. And I gave up on it again and again and again until the pandemic, actually. Because at its heart, the why of that book, it's a look at what do we owe each other as a community? What does it mean to have valor? What does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean to sacrifice for someone? That's not ever going to be on the back copy.
Yeah.
Because boy, wouldn't kids love that?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I think not. That's what's under the book. That's what's holding it up. And I needed the terrible, terrible experiences of the pandemic to make me really think about those things. My mom had died in 2013. She had come to live with me during that time, and she brought with her her sister, my tia Isa, the bad driver, who was wheelchair bound by then. She'd had a stroke, and my mom died. My mom had been her caretaker, so now Isa was in my care. And when the pandemic hit, Isa's condition had continued to deteriorate, so I had, a year earlier, moved her into a nursing facility that was 2 blocks from my house. So I saw Isa every day, and Maria, the lady who helped her when she lived with us, I continued to hire Maria to also go to the center to help dress her and company and all the things. And then the pandemic happened, and they closed all access. And I had to visit my aunt by tapping on the window, outside her window, and trying to talk to her through there. And it was one of the nursing homes where she was one of the early ones that had 90 deaths among the folks. So my aunt did not die of COVID, but she died by the time they let me in again. The staff had gotten sick. They had not taken the residents out of bed and moved them and so on. My aunt was in contraction, and it was just a very painful experience. And when my aunt passed, that was the last of that generation. All the Spanish in my life vanished. My roots seemed to vanish. It was acutely painful. And my daughter was a nurse, and I was afraid all day for her. So all these things were happening, and you remember what the country felt like, and the arguments, and the fears, and all of it. And all of that pushed me into a corner to ask myself those really hard questions and deal with regrets. And what do characters do what do people do when they regret something? So, yeah, it's weird how books work. You have to mine in there, but you also, sometimes what's happening in the world in that moment gives you an opening or a way to think about that book that's different. So I wrote this adventure story that's really about goodness and how we treat each other. I think.
I look forward to reading.
Yeah. I have a galley. I'll send you a card when I get home.
I want that.
All right, pass it to your friends.
Yes, excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Well, I see it's getting a little late, and you were talking about safe landings, and I'm really wanting everyone to have a safe landing as they head out into the wild, and to give a round of applause to Meg Medina. So thanks all for coming,
And are there books out there in the back
Yes,
somewhere that I
there's-
sign? Or
there's free books. If you don't already have a book, there's a table of books out here. And yes, if you do want to go out there. you
yes,
can
I'm
sign
happy to sign anyone's book and sending books to folks. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Please drive safe home. I'm glad that, I'm disappointed that Wisconsin weather us tonight. I guess I'm glad though that Miss Medina was
I
able
got
to
snow.
experience a Wisconsin winter. It was very interesting today. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at the library in the future.
Good night, everybody.
If you're still on, thank you guys so much for joining us for Meg Medina We are so sorry about the weather. I hope that you guys were at least able to catch most of this. With the sound, we just had to quick grab a phone to get this streamed. So thank you guys so much. If you're interested in a copy of the book, please feel free to reach out to the library. We have some copies still available to hand out. Thank you all. Have a safe evening.